Welcome to an explainer on Hong Kong's new national security law. Chinese legislature, the National People Congress, has imposed a sweeping security law on Hong Kong in order to contain the ongoing pro-democratic protest. The new law will criminalize most form of political dissent, undermines individual freedom, and put a tight lid on foreigners' activity in the city-state. Many believe it is an attempt by China to erode Hong Kong's autonomy and accelerate the process of integrating the city-state with the mainland China. Hong Kong, which is located on the southern coast of China, became a colony of British Empire after the Opium Wars. Having won the war, British forced China to sign a 99-year lease beginning in 1st July 1898. Since then, for almost 100 years, Hong Kong was a symbol of imperialistic aggression against China. Finally, in 1997, Hong Kong was returned to China. When Hong Kong reverted back to Chinese sovereignty, it was agreed that Hong Kong would exist as a special administrative region of China under the principle of one country, two systems framework. Under the framework, China would allow Hong Kong to exercise a high degree of local autonomy and pledged not to interfere with Hong Kong's existing economic, administrative and legal institution for at least a period of 50 years. It simply means that Hong Kong would be a part of China, but at the same time it would keep its own capitalist system, its own currency, right to protest with free press and its own legal system and legislature. These rights were supposed to be guaranteed to Hong Kong via a sort of mini constitution called the Basic Laws of Hong Kong, which were agreed between China and Britain in the Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984. So the twin principle of local autonomy and 50-year non-intervention pledge become the key cornerstone of Sino-British Joint Declaration and the relationship between mainland China and the city-state of Hong Kong. Politically, the Basic Law have defined that the government will feature a strong non-elected chief executive and a weak partially elected legislature. Although the drafters have stipulated that universal adult franchise would eventually be introduced in election to chief executive and legislature, no dates were specified in the document. And up to now, this has remained an unfulfilled promise which have led to numerous number of pro-democratic protests time and again. Umbrella movement started as a spontaneous social movement for democratic development in Hong Kong in September 2014. The movement was triggered by Beijing's announcement that all eligible voters can vote in 2017 chief executive election, but only to 2 or 3 candidates who would be nominated by Beijing-controlled nomination committee. Hong Kong people were bitterly disappointed and started demanding true democracy. The name of the movement arose from use of umbrella as a tool of passive resistance by the pro-democratic demonstrators against the use of pepper spray by Hong Kong police. A massive protest erupted against government's proposed extradition law that would allow the suspects to be sent to mainland China to face the trial. Hong Kong people saw extradition bill as a step too far and a tool of Chinese government to suppress political dissent. As much as 2 million people took part in the protest. The bill was finally withdrawn in September 2019, but the protest continued. Pro-democracy demonstrators demand amnesty for arrested protesters, independent inquiry into police brutality, and implementation of universal adult suffrage. Protesters also want Beijing-backed chief executive Carrie Lam to step down. Article 18 of Basic Law says that the mainland China can't impose its legislation on Hong Kong except when it comes to defense, foreign affairs, and exceptional circumstances in which China have declared either state of war or state of emergency as prescribed in Annexure 3 of Basic Law. Article 23 of Basic Law says that Hong Kong Legislative Council should enact a security law to prohibit treason, secession, sedition and subversion of Chinese government. However, the new national security law is not introduced by Hong Kong but was imposed on Hong Kong by China's National People Congress. The new security law consists of 66 articles. It criminalizes any act of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreigners or external forces. Secession means trying to break away from the country. Subversion means trying to undermine the power or authority of the central government. As per law, using violence or intimidation against people and damaging public properties can be considered as terrorism. These crimes can be punished by a maximum of life imprisonment. Those found guilty will not be allowed to stand for public office. Hong Kong police are given extensive controls to censor internet content, track people online, and seize electronic records. Beijing will establish a new security office in Hong Kong with its own law enforcement personnels, neither of which would come under the local authorities' jurisdiction. This office can send some cases to be tried in the mainland China. The law will also apply to some non-permanent residents from outside Hong Kong. Imposing mainland China's criminal law system on Hong Kong's common law system would certainly have a chilling effect on civil liberties of Hong Kong people. The new law will see people being punished for criticizing Beijing or Communist Party of China as it happens in the mainland. Many believe it will also erode Hong Kong's judicial independence. Hong Kong is an international financial hub. By restricting foreigners' activity, it could lead to flight of foreign capital. Hong Kong may lose its global financial center status as East Asian trading hub. The new law will also invite global disapproval for Beijing, which has already been accused of withholding certain key information related to COVID-19 pandemic. Over the years, Beijing have become impatient waiting for local government to enact the security law. In fact, local government attempted it in 2003 under pressure from Beijing but has to face widespread opposition. Experts say that the sense of urgency shown by Beijing is out of fear that the Hong Kong's legislature may come under the control of Democrats after the election later this year. In 2019, protest against extradition bill turned violent and evolved into a broader anti-China pro-democratic movement. China doesn't want that to happen again. China also fears that the values of pro-democratic movement may spread to mainland China, hence want to nip it in bud. China also believes that the West is using Hong Kong as a geopolitical tool. So Beijing intends to put tight lid on foreigners' activity in the city-state by implementing this new national security law. US announced that it would end preferential treatment for Hong Kong in trade and travel. These changes could see a higher tariff for goods coming from Hong Kong region, tougher visa requirements, suspension on obligations of extraditions, and so on. US Congress has also approved a Hong Kong Autonomy Act that targets Chinese officials who are implementing the security law, as well as banks and firms that do business with them. Australia, along with Canada, have suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong in a response to new security law. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison have announced that Hong Kong students, graduates working in Australia on a temporary visa will have an opportunity to stay and work for an extra 5 years, after which they can apply for permanent residency. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson have announced that United Kingdom will extend the residency right and a path to citizenship for up to 3 million people in Hong Kong. British plan covers those Hong Kongers who either have British national overseas passport or someone who is eligible to apply for it. International attention should be given to pro-democratic movement and effort to maintain local autonomy in Hong Kong. Letting China have its way could have a dire consequence for Taiwan and many other smaller states. China is immune from any individual country's response. Hence, a coordinated response from a bigger power nation is required.